The other day I was watching Property Brothers, and I really like how these two brothers they design houses, and the way they help people buy and sell their properties, right? It's like really good. And I was thinking about, should I get a property of my own? I mean, I'm single now, and as a woman, I'm afraid like when I get married, right? Would my decision today be a waste? Because generally the usually a guy would already have his own property. So how does that like leave me with my property? Should I get one, Pauline, or not?
That's a very, very good question. And I believe a lot of ladies out there would like to know the answer. So stay tuned and we shall discuss this in a moment's time.
Welcome back to episode 7 on Smart Women Finance. So before we get into our topic today, just a brief introduction about who we are. So together with me today, we have Pauline Teo. She's a licensed financial planner, and me, myself, I'm Rocking Rachel, and I'm an insurance advisor. So we two ladies are the go-to girls of this podcast, Smart Women Finance, and we actually aim to serve women like yourself out there, whether or not you are focused on building a career, or you're getting into a marriage, or you're currently a mother. We would like to help you with your daily financial struggles through our sharings on this podcast. So if you have any struggles that you are facing today, don't forget to hashtag us on our social media platforms at AskSWF. And do join our community group. We will brief you more on that later on. But for now, let's go back to the topic. As a woman, do you think you should own a property?
We would like to inform you that whatever discussed in this topic and in this podcast is completely general advice or based on our own personal experience and opinions. If you are facing any financial issues, we do recommend that you seek consultation with a licensed financial planner. Thank you.
I think the first question we should be asking ourselves, right? What is the reason why we really want to buy our own property, right? So What is your reason, Rachel?
Well, for me, as a single person, okay, it would be to gain that sense of independency, because now that you're a young adult and you are exploring the world. I remember the moment I had my car, my God, it was like a breakthrough. Like it's like they say 21 years old you get the key to the house, but no, when you get your car, that's when you really get
when you can fly, right?
Yeah, that's when you really get the real freedom. So I mean, for me, it would be like if I have my own property, it'll be my own space, and I get to have that real sense of independency. Although today I do have my own room, but my mom still cooks for me at home. She still she still makes tea for me and all these things lah. So when you are really on your own, you get to experience that. That would be one of the main reasons lah.
Okay. And I think it's not really wrong if I think about it, because I also bought my property when I was much younger, and that time when I was single. And I think it was like, close to 30s when I first got my first property. So I think during that time, right, when I wanted a property, and it's actually very traditional as well, it's more of having the security that one day my parents are no longer around, I have a place of my own, and it's like a roof on top of your head, right? Without having to depend on another person, or to actually feel that, you're dependent on somebody, right? So I think in terms of this was how I felt when I was single. But now if you ask me, many years after that I'm married, right? I still have properties of my own. And it's actually a sense of fulfillment for me, feeling security. It's something tangible, right? What do you have? I have a house, something tangible that you can hold on to call it your own. But you are right, there are some people, especially married women, after they get married, right? Because the thoughts could be husbands are already providing whatever you need, like, for example, food on the table, the bills are paid by your husband, and you've got a roof on your head, right? And some husbands may even tell you, hey, why not take care of the house, take care of the family, take care of the house. So you're not obligated to really go out and work, So I think we need to be very clear in some ways, like what exactly is your current status in life? If you're a married woman, but you are working and earning your own income, I would say owning a property is not exactly wrong if you have the means to pay for all the household expenses as well as your personal property. Okay, maybe it could be for investments or whatever reasons that you may have out there. But I think if you are married, but you are no longer working and actually depending on your husband, then it's something food for thought. Okay, because during the good times, maybe your husband could help you to settle, the repayment, the loan repayment or whatsoever. But what happens if, let's say, he loses his job? First priority will always be, how do we take care of the family's expenses first? So your property now could actually be at risk because there is no solid income, right, in order to help sponsor or even, rental income may not be sufficient to even cover the cost of the loans and other expenses. So I think these are areas we need to be very, very clear upon. Okay, what is it that women really want? Okay, so back to the question now, right? So what are some of the options you have when you want to buy a property? What are things you need to consider?
Just had this question come through my mind. Since you are talking about married women here, right?
Yeah.
So usually in a marriage, right, you would notice many people start doing joint ownership of many things. So
that's true.
Would you? I mean, what are your thoughts when you've started a family, married already? Do you think it's wise to still own properties in a single person's name, or should everything be in joint name? Since now you have made vows to, till death do us part, right? So how do you find? I mean, what do you think about this?
Okay, I think that's a very good question there. Okay, Rachel, I would say different schools of thought again. Personally, I feel that there is nothing wrong for independent women to own their own property, because even though vows are meant to cover us until death do us part, right? But we both know divorce rates in Malaysia itself, it's actually on the higher side. So what happens when a woman is no longer cared for by a man? What happens to females then? And I think personally, if you ask me, a lot of women out there, even though you don't verbally say it, we want security. We want to feel that, our needs are taken care of. Should something bad happen to us, we still have a place to call our home.
Correct.
I don't think so. And anybody out there can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think so. Any one of these independent women want to go crawling back to their parents' place, even though that is actually an option. Okay, that is actually an option. But I think it's also about independence. If you're used to living your life a certain way, in a certain manner, in a certain style, it's very hard for you to go back to your parents, where your mom would definitely want to make sure that you are physically okay, mentally okay. And, at that point in time, a lot of friction could happen just going back, to parents. And I think ego as well is another thing that could happen. We've got our pride. So having to go back to our parents doesn't feel a very good feeling at all, if you know what I mean. Okay.
Right.
So I think with that said, a woman would definitely still want to say, I would want to own a house just in case something bad happens. I have a place to really, call my own and to stand on my own 2 feet until things stabilizes, until maybe I find someone again in order to start another relationship. What do you think, Rachel?
Well, it is definitely, I cannot deny it, because looking at the statistics of not just Malaysia, but in the world, that the divorce rates are really high.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is back to your beliefs and your own values in your own relationship. How do you want to play? But it is an option to consider.
That's
of course, coming back to what we talked about earlier, right, in terms of marriage, to discuss, I think the main key, if you want to own a property in your marriage, right, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's okay for whatever reasons. But I believe your partner does deserve to know that you are owning one, and the reason that why you want to own one. So I believe when there is transparency, even in the bad times, right? There will be a sort of understanding towards this property, like why is this property still existent in our marriage, in our family union, right?
Correct.
So I would recommend you ladies listening to check out our episode 4, where we talk about budgeting, and we break down how can you properly look into how easy ways of doing budgeting,
Yeah.
and to see, once you have your budget in place, I believe you will know whether or not there is room to own another property, because it's not a need, it's a want. That's what we need to always differentiate, lah, right?
Yeah.
So when it's a want, it should be something that you can put out money there without neglecting the actual needs of the family or the marriage. Yeah.
I think with that said as well, it comes back to the basics of everything. Budgeting is just the first step that all of us need to be very vigilant, regardless whether you're single, you're married, with or without kids. This is the bare basic fundamentals, right, of finances that we need to make sure that it's properly taken care of first. If you have additional money, excess money that can help you to accumulate assets, right, such as a property and whatsoever, then it is actually something that you can budget for it as well. So I think as long as your budgets do not exceed whatever it is that you earn, you are actually feeling very comfortable, even though you're having this a really big commitment here, which is buying a property, right? Then I would say, by all means, go and get it. But if you see the budget's very tight, and you need to also not always factor in the best of times. I think the pandemic the last 2 years has taught us that, when you actually prepare for the worst and you're still feeling comfortable or not too bad, then I think it's actually a good time to think about buying properties.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it is, after all, a long-term commitment. Like in Malaysia, you can actually get loans, maximum loan of 30 to 35 years. Okay, and that's a very, very long time if you think about it, to be committed to a property. Okay, so I think these are things you really need to factor in before you think about anything else, basically, right? And I think for ladies out there who really missed our last episode, which was actually episode 6, you should actually take a listen to it, because we talked about no money, no honey, and what does it mean for women out there if you are financially unfaithful? So I would urge those ladies who missed that episode, do catch up on that one too, in order for you to understand what are some implications of finances in your relationship if you do not plan it out well, especially when you're already married. Okay?
Yeah.
So those would be the two areas, I think. Yeah.
Coming back to, since now we've addressed the married category and how can you look into this topic, let's look back at the ones that are single and not married yet. To me, I personally believe that owning your own property as a single person is totally okay. And even though you get married and there's a redundancy of properties, one of those properties could be sold off, or it could be turned into an investment to actually help the family in some way to bear some certain expenses. So it can be an asset to the family as well.
That's right.
So yeah, but of course, in today's, if you see the property prices today, it is quite tough for a single person to withstand the loan, or rather to actually sustain the loan.
Yeah.
So many of my friends that I've noticed, they go into joint ownership, either with their siblings, or sometimes some of them even go in with their boyfriends.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are thinking about going into a property with someone else, you always have to keep in mind that what if things go sour? Because nothing for example, girlfriend and boyfriend owning a property, there's nothing concrete yet. There's no legal contract stating that both of y'all are, married and all these things. So if the relationship does not work out, how are y'all going to sustain the property? Is one person just going to dump the whole thing on the other person, because it's going to be a heavy load? So these are some questions you want to just think about. Maybe you can discuss it with the other partner. And if both of y'all are comfortable with it, then proceed on. But if there's some hesitancy, then I would say maybe think twice before entering such a decision.
Actually, in my personal opinion, and this is actually a real case study where clients came to see me to resolve this property issue for them, right? I wouldn't advise, okay, any of the single couples out there who are in relationship thinking of getting married but not there yet, right, in terms of signing the registration of marriage, right, or rather getting a certificate of marriage, right, to actually buy properties together. Now, why is that the case? When the relationship goes sour, usually, either one of these parties will start to back off from the loan. The loan is actually a legal contract that you have with the bank. So regardless of what status you are in terms of your relationship, the bank expects you to service your loan, okay, on a monthly basis. They do not expect you to default, because defaulting your loan would actually be bad for either party.
Correct.
Okay, so this is where things will become very, very hard to manage, especially when you're talking about money, okay, and the relationship has gone sour. It's not going to be something easy for you to actually resolve, because at the end of the day, it's going to cost you even more money in order to get a lawyer in place, in order to, settle this amicably, and, to either transfer the property to one person's name or to get consent from both parties to sell this property. Okay, and this is where the complications come in. I think also there's cases whereby, I've got friends who are actually in relationship, and then something happened before they got married and they really have joint property. Now your so-called future in-laws, which aren't exactly your in-laws yet, now with you trying to resolve this property matter. Okay, so do not take things very lightly, because a lot of things can really happen. So if you're not legally binding in terms of the relationship, I would suggest that, it's best not to venture into the property itself. Okay. Yeah. And I do hear you, Rachel. I do agree, with the income levels of many people who have just started working. It is not something feasible for them to buy a property on their own, unless their income is really substantial enough, and they're able to really comfortably service the loan on a monthly basis. So again, with this option of buying the property with, say for example, business partners, it could be with siblings, again, things may go sour. Okay, because again, whatever that involves money, usually it will be a very different story when things don't go well. So I would say the best thing is, if you're able to buy the property on your own comfortably, then it would be best to actually venture into it. If you're actually thinking of buying this joint property and it is, it's actually not really clear cut with the person that you're actually buying the property with, do have another separate agreement, okay, which you can actually speak to a lawyer in order to get this document drawn up. In the event something bad happens, what is the next course of action to take?
Right.
And that's just to take care of your interests. Okay, but of course, whenever you're buying something really big and happy, you don't think of the consequences, but these are the biggest tips we can actually give you today on how to take care of your own interests.
Correct. And speaking of joint ownership, right, from the insurance perspective, many loans today, when we talk about joint ownership, they come in this legal term called tenancy in common. So what happens in this scenario is, when the partner passes away, the portion that the partner owns doesn't go to the surviving partner. It goes to the estate of the deceased. So what happens is, two owners here, right? There's two. But because there's no will drawn up, and also there's no agreement done, no insurance policy set up, what happens is, now the estate of the deceased is the ownership. That means like the next of kin. So for example, in the case of spouses, right? So the children becomes the owner, or the parents, right? They become the co-owners of the house. So as a wife, I would be like, this house is mine, but now it's no longer mine. I have to share it with other people. So it doesn't leave you in a comfortable position. And of course, as a single person, it's even worse lah, because you have other people who you may not even be related with owning the house. So in this kind of scenario, it is really important to speak with an insurance advisor on how can you do proper insurance planning, where in the event of the partner passing away of this property, the shares, or rather the whole house for that person's property, is paid off. Or you can even set it in a way where, especially this would be best for spouses, where if one spouse passes away, the whole house is paid out for. So the house completely becomes an asset, no longer a liability. So it is, although this is a very minor thing, of course, a house is something you can see physically. An insurance policy is something like, it's not something you can really see. It's intangible product, but it is something where if it's not planned properly can cause a lot of pain and problem in the future. So it's a home that y'all are building. So nobody wants a home to turn into a chaos, right? So do plan it well. Speak to an insurance advisor about it, and speak to your financial planner about it on how do you, how can you, is your debt ratio in line with the loan that you're about to take? So these are certain elements that you should take into.
I think just adding on to that as well, Rachel, there are many other hidden costs when you want to own a property. There's also a lot of other hidden areas, right? Like, for example, what Rachel just explained a moment ago, that may not be properly set up. And this will be an impact to you, especially when you want to own a property with, multiple ownerships, or even in situations whereby, it's not a very clear-cut situation how, this property, in the event of a premature death, it could actually impact you very much greatly. So I would say for ladies out there, buying a house, it's not like buying a vegetable, it's not something, it's not an easy decision just to make with the snap of a fingers. And, just because, you think you can service the loan, let's just buy it. There's a lot more other hidden costs in buying a property itself. The preparedness that you need to have before you own a property, there are many other areas which it would be best for you to speak to someone, on this particular area holistically, before you make that financial decision. So
maybe we'll even do another episode on this too, because there's a lot to discuss here.
A lot. Okay, so I think the biggest takeaway that we can actually share with you is, number one, it is not wrong for women to buy the property or own the property on your own, under your own very name. But at the same time, please do know what your rights are. So the only best way we could actually really properly advise you, case-to-case basis, to whatever you have in mind for the property that you really want to buy, do speak to a licensed financial planner, or if anything at all, speak to one of us, either Rachel or myself, and we'll be more than happy to, go through what are some hidden costs that you may not be aware of, or some other obligations that you may not be aware of that needs to be considered before you sign on that dotted line, okay, to own that property. Okay.
Correct. So just a recap on what we've discussed today. Basically, we know that, number one, before you own your property, know your why, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And the second one would be assess your current financial situation, whether or not you can, is it comfortable for you to service a loan, right? Yeah. And the third one is, don't forget to watch our episode 4 and 6 so that you can be fully aware of how to do budgeting, as well as in a relationship, how do you manage your finances?
Yeah, definitely. And if anything at all, number 4, speak with a financial planner, okay, to have all the objections or all the options laid out before you actually make a decision on what is the right choice that you should be making.
Correct.
Okay, that would save you a lot of money and headache, not to mention.
Yeah. So money is something that it can be peaceful if it's properly managed.
Definitely. Don't go into it blindly. Okay. Yeah. And again, it's buying a property with commitments as high as this. It is not a step of a finger kind of decision. So don't go into it in a rush. All right. So, lady,
right.
we hope that this episode has given you a bit more to think about if you're talking about properties. And if doubt, just come and speak to one of us.
Absolutely.
Right. So, signing off for this week's episode. See ya. Take care. Bye.